In a small village called Oduma, nestled deep in the heart of the thick forest, there lived a young girl named Ifunanya. She was known for her beauty, which was as radiant as the morning sun, and her kindness, which touched everyone in the village. She lived with her grandmother after the death of her parents at an early age. Ifunanya had a secret fascination. She loved mirrors. There was something about seeing her reflection that brought her comfort, as if the mirror held a world of its own where she could escape into. Day and night she would be staring at the mirror, though her grandmother told her to desist from looking into the mirrors at night, but she wouldn't listen. One day, an elderly woman who lived on the edge of the village visited Ifunanya's home. The old woman, known as Nneka, was feared by the villagers. She was said to possess knowledge of the ancient ways, the kind that no one dared to speak of. Despite the stories, Ifunanya was not afraid of her. She welcomed Nneka into her home, offering her food and drinks. As they sat together, Nneka looked at Ifunanya with eyes that seemed to pierce through her. "You are a curious child," she said in a voice that was soft yet powerful. "But curiosity can be very dangerous, especially at night." Ifunanya frowned, confused by the old woman's words. "What do you mean, Nneka? I am just an ordinary girl." Nneka smiled, a knowing smile that sent shivers down Ifunanya's spine. "There is nothing ordinary about you, my dear. You have a love for mirrors, do you not?" Ifunanya's heart skipped a beat. How did Nneka know? She nodded her head slowly. Nneka leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Listen carefully, Ifunanya. Never under any circumstance should you look into a mirror at night. The mirror at night is not the same as it is during the day. It holds secrets, ancient secrets, and looking into it might open doors and portals that should remain closed." Ifunanya's curiosity was piqued. "What kind of secret?" she asked. Nneka's eyes grew distant, as if she was recalling something from long ago. "There are spirits, Ifunanya, spirit that dwells in the darkness. They are drawn to reflection, to the world beyond the glass. At night, the veil between our world and theirs is thin, and a mirror can become a gateway. If you look into a mirror at night, you might see some things that does not belong to this world." Ifunanya felt a chill run down her spine, but her curiosity was stronger than her fears. "What happens if I see something?" she asked Nneka. Nneka's expression grew grave. "If you see something, it will see you too, and once it sees you, it will want to cross over." Ifunanya shivered at the thought, but couldn't help but wonder what such a creature might look like. The old woman's words lingered in her mind long after she left. That night, Ifunanya found herself staring at the mirror in her room. The moonlight streamed through the window, casting an air glow on the glass. Nneka's warning echoed in her mind, but the temptation was too strong. She had to know if the old woman was telling the truth. With the trembling hands, Ifunanya lit a small lamp and placed it beside the mirror. Her heart pounded in her chest as she slowly lifted her eyes to meet her reflection. At first, everything seemed normal. It was just her staring back at herself. But then, as the seconds ticked by, she noticed something strange. Her reflection was smiling, but she wasn't. Ifunanya's breath caught in her throat. Her reflection's smile grew wider, more sinister. The eyes in the mirror darkened, and the room around her began to fade, replaced by an inky blankness. Ifunanya tried to look away, but she couldn't. It was as if something was holding her gaze, pulling her deeper into the mirror's world. Suddenly, the reflection began to move on its own, stepping forward, closer to the glass. Ifunanya's heart raced as she watched her own reflection reach out a hand, as if trying to touch her. She stumbled back, knocking over the lamp. The room was plunged into darkness, and in that moment she heard a voice, faint and distant, whispering her name. Ifunanya! She screamed, snapping out of the trance in a panic. She scrambled to find the lamp and relight it. As soon as the light filled the room, she looked back at the mirror. Her reflection was normal again, but the fear remained. She covered the mirror with a cloth, her hands shaking uncontrollably. For the next few days, Ifunanya avoided the mirror. She couldn't shake the memory of what she had seen or the feeling that something was watching her. The village seemed normal during the day, but at night, the shadows seemed darker and every sound made her jump. It wasn't long before strange things began to happen. Ifunanya would hear whispers at night, soft and indistinct. Objects in the house would move on their own, and sometimes she would catch glimpses of shadows that didn't belong to anyone. The fear that had started as a seed in her mind began to grow, consuming her thought and her whole being. One night, as she lay on the bed, she heard a knock on her door. It was faint, but in the silence of the night, it was unmistakable. Ifunanya froze, her heart pounding. Who could be knocking at such an hour? The knocking came again, louder this time. Slowly, she got out of the bed and approached the door, her hands trembling. "Who is it?" she called out, her voice barely above a whisper. There was no answer, just another knock, more insistent. Ifunanya reached for the door handle, her mind racing. She hesitated for a moment, then pulled the door open. To her horror, there was no one out there. But as she stood on the doorway, she felt a cold breeze brush past her, as if something unseen had entered her home. The whispers started again, louder this time, surrounding her, filling the room. Ifunanya slammed the door shut and backed away, her heart coming in short gaps. She knew deep down that whatever had crossed over that night when she had looked into the mirror was now in her world, and it was getting stronger. The days that followed were a blur of fear and confusion. Ifunanya tried to go about her daily life, but the presence in her home was impossible to ignore. It was always there, lurking just out of her sight, waiting for the night to fall. She couldn't sleep, she couldn't eat, and the once vibrant girl began to wither under the weight of her fear. Desperate, Ifunanya sought out Nneka, hoping the old woman could help her. She found Nneka by the river, collecting herbs. The old woman looked up at Ifunanya approach, her eyes filled with pity. "I warned you, child, but you wouldn't listen," Nneka said softly. Ifunanya fell to her knees, tears streaming down her face. "Please, Nneka, I am sorry. I didn't mean to disobey you or to be disobedient, but now something is in my home. Something is in my home, please, and is haunting me. I can't take it anymore." Nneka sighed and placed a hand on Ifunanya's shoulder. "I can help you, but the path to undoing what you have done is not easy. The spirit has attached itself to you because you looked into the mirror at night. To rid yourself of it, you must face it and return it to where it belongs. Ifunanya's heart sank. The thought of facing that terrifying presence was almost too much to bear. But she knew she had no choice. She couldn't live like this any longer. Nneka led Ifunanya back to her home and prepared a ritual to banish the spirit. She drew symbols on the floor, light candles, and burned incense that filled the air with a pungent aroma. Ifunanya stood in the center of the room, clutching a small mirror that Nneka had given to her. When the spirit appears, Nneka instructed, you must use this mirror to trap it, but be careful, for it will not go willingly. As the night fell, the room grew colder and the shadows dispersed. Ifunanya could feel the presence growing stronger, feeding off her fear. The whisper returned, louder than ever, swelling around her like a storm. The candles flickered and the room seemed to close in on her. Suddenly, the mirror in Ifunanya's hand grew heavier, and she saw something moving within its depth. The reflection in the glass twisted and distorted until it no longer resembled her. Instead, it became a dark figure with glowing eyes, staring back at her with malevolent intent. The figure stepped out of the mirror, its form barely visible in the dim light. Ifunanya's heart raced as she faced the spirit, her hands trembling. It reached out towards her, its fingers long and claw-like. Ifunanya knew this was her only chance. Summoning all her courage, she raised the mirror and spoke the words Nneka had taught her. The spirit screamed, a sound that pierced the air like 1,000 voices, crying out in agony. It recoiled, trying to escape, but the mirror's power was too strong. With a final desperate cry, the spirit was sucked back into the mirror, and the room fell silent. Ifunanya collapsed to the floor, the mirror slipping from her grasp. Nneka rushed to her side, gently lifting her up. "It is done," she said, her voice filled with relief. "The spirit is trapped back, and you are safe." But as Ifunanya looked at the mirror on the floor, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was still watching her from within its depths. Ifunanya went about her daily activities with a renewed sense of peace, though the memory of that terrifying night still lingered in the corners of her mind. The spirit had been trapped back into the mirror with Nneka's help, and life in Oduma village seemed to return to normal. The villagers, unaware of the ordeal she had gone through, continued with their activities, and Ifunanya did her best to do the same. But despite Nneka's reassurance, Ifunanya couldn't shake the feeling that someone was always watching her. It was a presence that she couldn't see, but she could feel it, like eyes burning into her whenever she was alone. She tried to brush off the sensation, reminding herself of Nneka's words, "You'll be alright." Even her grandmother, who had been so grateful to Nneka for helping them, constantly reminded her that this was a lesson she had to learn the hard way. The elderly woman had always warned Ifunanya to stay away from mirrors at night, but Ifunanya's curiosity had gotten the better of her, leading to the harrowing experience that had changed her life. Her grandmother's stern words echoed in her mind, a constant reminder of the dangers she had narrowly escaped. "You must be careful, Ifunanya," her grandmother had said, her voice laced with concern. "The world is full of things we do not understand, and sometimes it's best to leave certain mysteries alone." Ifunanya nodded her head, vowing to heed her grandmother's warning from now on. She avoided mirrors as much as possible, especially at night, and tried to focus on the simple joys of life in the village. She spent more time helping her grandmother with household chores, tending to the gardens, and visiting her friends. Yet, no matter how much she tried to push it away, the feeling of being watched never truly left her. One bright afternoon, as Ifunanya was returning from the market with a basket full of fruit and vegetables, she met a man named Ugo. He was tall, strong, with a warm smile that immediately put her at ease. Ugo, who was from that village but had traveled out of the village at early age to learn trade, had returned back to the village to establish his business. His gentle nature and kind eyes made him popular among the villagers immediately, and it wasn't long before he and Ifunanya struck up a friendship. Ugo would often stop by Ifunanya's home to help her with chores or to bring fresh produce from his farm to her family. They would sit together under the shade of the large mango tree in front of her house, sharing stories and laughter. Ifunanya found herself drawn to Ugo's calm presence, and slowly the unease that had plagued her began to fade. She felt safe with him, and for the first time since the incident with the mirror, she started believing that she might be able to move on after all. As the weeks passed by, Ifunanya and Ugo grew closer. He was not only a good man but also a patient listener, always ready to lend a helping hand or offer words of comfort. He never pried into her past or asked about the shadows that sometimes clouded her eyes. Instead, he seemed content to simply be by her side, offering his support in whatever way she needed. One day, as they were walking by the river, Ugo noticed the distant look in Ifunanya's eyes. He gently took her hands and asked, "Is something bothering you, Ifunanya? You seem lost in thought and a bit distant." Ifunanya hesitated, unsure if she should share her fears with him. She had never told anyone aside her family about the spirit or the mirror. But something about Ugo's steady gaze made her feel like she could trust him. After a moment's silence, she decided to open up. "There is something I have been struggling with," Ifunanya began, her voice trembling slightly. "Something that happened not long ago. Something that still haunts me." Ugo listened intently as Ifunanya recounted the events of that fateful night, how she had ignored her grandmother's warning and looked into the mirror at night, and the terrifying encounter that followed. She told him about Neka's help in trapping the spirit, and how, despite everything, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was still being watched. Ugo's expression grew serious as he listened, but he didn't interrupt. When Ifunanya finished, he squeezed her hand reassuringly. "I believed you, Ifunanya. I have had things like this before. Yes, my grandmother even warned me too. Things that go beyond our understanding. But you're strong, and you faced it bravely. Whatsoever you're feeling now, you will get through it together, alright?" Ifunanya felt a wave of relief wash over her. Ugo's words were like a balm to her troubled heart, and she found herself smiling for the first time in days. "Thank you, Ugo. It means a lot to me that you believed me." Ugo smiled back, his eyes warm with affection. "You don't have to carry this burden alone, Ifunanya. I am here for you, and we will face this together, okay?" As they continued their walk along the riverbank, Ifunanya felt a sense of hope growing within her. Maybe, just maybe, with Ugo by her side, she could finally put the past behind her and live without fear. But deep down, in the recesses of her mind, the lingering feeling that something wasn't quite right still persisted. And though she tried to ignore it, she couldn't help but wonder if the spirit in the mirror was truly gone, or if it was just waiting for the right moment to return. After a while, Ugo asked Ifunanya to marry him, and she accepted. As they started planning for their marriage, on the day of the marriage, Ugo's father was bringing out drinks that they would carry to their in-laws. But as he carried the keg of palm wine, it mysteriously fell on the ground and scattered. Ugo's father was shocked as he shouted, "Abomination!" In the land, a keg of palm wine is symbolic during marriages, and it is said that once your keg of palm wine breaks on the day of the marriage, it is a bad omen. So Ugo's father told Ugo that they cannot continue with the marriage. It must be cancelled, he told Ugo. You cannot marry Ifunanya. Ugo was surprised at his father's words, and he asked him, "Why, father? Why the sudden change of mind?" But his father only replied, "Something bad will happen if we continue with this marriage." Ugo was furious at his father, but he decided that he needed to find out what was wrong. What is going on? Why would the keg of palm wine break today of all days? He ran to the hut of Nneka, the village seer, and explained everything that had happened that morning to her. Nneka nodded her head in deep thought. After a while, she sent someone to summon Ifunanya immediately. When Ifunanya got there, she performed some prayers and realized that the spirit from the mirror did not leave after all, because it had touched Ifunanya right from the mirror. So it has attached itself to Ifunanya's life, and it has been feeding off her, preventing good things from coming Ifunanya's way. It had also tried to stop the marriage by breaking the keg of palm wine. After hearing all that, Ifunanya was only crying, because she realized the extent of the consequences of her disobedience. She wept bitterly as Ugo consoled her and reassured her that they would go through it together. Ugo held Ifunanya tightly as she sobbed into his chest, her tears soaking his shirt. He could feel the weight of her guilt, the regret that had been gnawing at her since the moment the mirror spirit had latched onto her life. He gently stroked her hair, whispering words of comfort, trying to soothe her troubled heart. But deep down, Ugo was just as troubled. The thought of a dark spirit hovering over their lives, threatening to destroy their future together, filled him with a cold dread. Nneka watched them silently, her wise eyes reflecting the gravity of the situation. She knew that consoling words alone wouldn't be enough to free Ifunanya from the spirit's hold. The presence of the spirit was strong, its influence spreading like a shadow over Ifunanya's life, turning every moment of joy into a looming threat. Nneka had dealt with spirits before, but this one was different, older, darker, and more determined. "Ifunanya, listen to me," Nneka said firmly, breaking the silence. "The spirit is powerful, but there is still a way to break its hold on you. It won't be easy, and it will require courage and strength. But if you're willing, we can banish it once and for all." Ifunanya lifted her tear-streaked face to look at Nneka, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and hope. "What must I do, Nneka? I will do anything to be free from this curse." Nneka nodded her head, pleased by Ifunanya's resolve. "Good. We will need to perform a cleansing ritual, and that will sever the bond between you and the spirit. But this ritual is dangerous. The spirit will not leave without a fight. It may try to deceive you, to manipulate you, and make you believe things that aren't true. You must stay strong and trust in the process. Ugo tightened his grip on Ifunanya's hand, his own determination strengthening. We will do whatever it takes, Nneka. I won't let the spirit take Ifunanya away from me, Ugo said. Nneka gave them both a small approving smile. Very well. We must act quickly before the spirit gains more power. Ugo, you will need to gather some things for the ritual. A calabash of fresh water from the stream, white chalk, and a piece of kola nut. Ifunanya, you must prepare yourself mentally and spiritually. You need to let go of all the fear and doubt that has been holding you back. Only then will this ritual work. Ugo and Amara nodded, both knowing that the road ahead will be very difficult. But they had no choice. If they want a future together, they had to face this challenge. As Ugo set off to gather the items Nneka had requested, Ifunanya stayed behind with the wise woman. Nneka guided her through a series of prayers and meditations designed to clear her mind and strengthen her spirit. But as Ifunanya closed her eyes and repeated the ancient words, she couldn't shake the feeling like someone is there watching her. The air in the hut grew thick with tension as the day wore on. Nneka worked tirelessly to prepare for the ritual, drawing intricate patterns with the chalk on the floor and murmuring incantations and prayers under her breath. She could sense the spirit presence growing stronger, as if it knew what they were planning and was trying to counter it. When Ugo finally returned, his arms full of the required items, the sun was beginning to set, casting long air shadows across the village. Nneka quickly set to work, arranging the items in a precise manner and instructing Ugo and Ifunanya on their roles in the ritual. As the first stars appeared in the night sky, Nneka began the ritual. She lit a small fire in the center of the hut, the flames casting flickering light on the chalk patterns. She placed the calabash of water beside the fire and broke the kola nut into several pieces, placing them carefully on the ground. Ifunanya, sit in the middle of the chalk circle, Nneka commanded, her voice steady and authoritative. Ugo, you must stand outside the circle and do not move no matter what happens. Ifunanya hesitated for a moment, a shiver of fear running down her spine, but she steeled herself, remembering Nneka's words. This was her only chance to break free. Taking a deep breath, she stepped into the circle and sat down. Her heart pounded in her chest. Nneka began to chant, her voice rising and falling in a rhythm that seemed to resonate with the very air around them. The flames of the fire danced in response, growing taller and more intense as the ritual progressed. Ifunanya closed her eyes, trying to focus on the sound of Nneka's voice, but the feeling of being watched grew stronger, more oppressive. Suddenly, the air in the hut turned icy cold, and a gust of wind blew through, extinguishing the flames of the fire. The room plunged into darkness, and Ifunanya's eyes snapped open in panic. But before she could react, a soft air voice whispered in her eyes, sending a chill down her spine. Ifunanya. It was the voice of the spirit, cold and mocking. Ifunanya's heart raced as she felt its presence closing in on her, suffocating her with its malevolent energy. She wanted to scream, to run, but she was frozen in place, trapped in the circle as the spirit's influence grew stronger. Ifunanya, look at me. The voice was insistent, seductive, and Ifunanya felt an overwhelming urge to obey, to turn and face the spirit. But deep inside, she knew that if she did, all would be lost. She squeezed her eyes shut, clinging desperately to Nneka's words, trying to resist the spirit's pull. "Ifunanya, don't listen to it," Ugo shouted from outside the circle, his voice cutting through the darkness like a lifeline. "Stay strong. You can do this, my love. You can do this." Nneka's chant grew louder, more forceful. The chalk patterns on the floor began to glow faintly in the dark. The spirit presence grew more agitated, its whispers turning into angry hisses as it fought to maintain its hold on Ifunanya. "You cannot escape me," the spirit snarled, its voice growing more distorted, more desperate. "You are mine." But Ifunanya refused to give in. She gritted her teeth, focusing all her energy on the glowing chalk patterns. The sound of Nneka's chant and the reassuring presence of Ugo just beyond the circle. Slowly, the spirit's grip on her mind began to weaken, its whispers fading into the background. Finally, with a final burst of energy, Nneka's chant reached its peak, and the glowing chalk patterns flared with a brilliant light. The spirit let out a furious scream, and Ifunanya felt a being forcefully ripped away from her, its presence vanishing into the thin air. The fire in the center of the hut reignited, casting a warm, comforting glow all over the room. The tension in the air dissipated, leaving behind a sense of calm and relief. Ifunanya opened her eyes, her heart still pounding, but the oppressive feeling was gone. The spirit was no longer with her. Nneka lowered her arms, her voice falling silent as she took a deep breath. "It is done," she said softly, her voice tinged with exhaustion. "The spirit has been banished forever." Ugo rushed forward, pulling Ifunanya into his arms, relief flooding his face. "Ifunanya, you did it! You did it! You are finally free!" Ifunanya clung to him, tears of gratitude streaming down her face. "Thank you, Ugo. Thank you, Nneka. I couldn't have done this without you people. Thank you so much. I owe my life to you people." Nneka smiled, her eyes warm with pride. "You were strong, Ifunanya. Remember the strength. And never let fear control you again. And always heed the warning of the elders. Some things are not meant to be trifled with in Udumaland." As the first light of dawn began to creep through the cracks in the hut walls, Ifunanya, Ugo, and Nneka knew that the hardest part was behind them. And as they stepped out into the light of a new day, Ifunanya made a silent vow to herself. Never again would she let curiosity lead her down a path of darkness. Obedience, she said to herself, is better than sacrifice. The mirror had been a lesson, one she would never forget. Their marriage was rescheduled, and they got married and lived a long and fulfilling lives.